Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? We are back with another episode. That's right, another episode of the Class in Session podcast. I am your host, Logan Taylor, with my partner in crime, my amazing co host, Mr. Dante Hampton. And we got a special guest for you all today. Dante.
Yes. Like Logan said, man, we're back here with another episode of Class in Session. We have Chris Gordon. He's from New Home, Minnesota. Did I get that right, Chris?
Very close, Dante. New Ulm, ULM. It's German.
New
And
Home.
so,
Okay, New Home.
yeah, but it
See?
is my
Okay.
home, so that works.
I got you. Chris is a faithful husband, father of three. He's a middle school special education teacher that's online. He's a professional speaker. He's a podcast host. He's an author, martial arts, and pop culture geek. So Chris, first off, man, we just want to say thank you for even being a part of our podcast.
My
Can you
pleasure.
just tell our audience a little bit how you even got into education, how this came about?
Certainly. First of all, I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me and asking me to be on here. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. So, I actually got into education because I didn't want to get into television. When I was in college, I attended the University of Michigan Flint campus. So it was part of the University of Michigan umbrella, but there was a campus in Flint that I attended. And on that campus was a public television station called WFUM. I worked first in the booth, running cameras, switching shows. And this is when they had reel to reel still. So we had the big circular discs of tape you had to run through and snake through the machine. And then eventually I made it to the writing staff. I was part of the promotions department, and I really enjoyed that job. However, as I continued on throughout my college career, I realized this was not as enjoyable as I thought, especially when I look in the long term. And I've always enjoyed working with kids. So I switched gears. I went into education. I had to go a couple more years into my schooling, but it was well worth it because I really enjoy working with students, working with kids, helping them grow not only academically, but socially and emotionally as well.
Okay. All right. That's a okay. That's a we ain't heard nobody do. We haven't heard anybody do. Most people say, oh, this was, this is where my heart was and wanting to serve and different things like that. So you did it because you didn't want to go into TV.
Which is ironic because, as I'm becoming a speaker, as Dante said, I do want to be on TV now. I just
Right.
didn't want to, I just want to be in front of the camera and not behind it. And
Right.
so, there
Gotcha.
were just a lot of different politics and different struggles that I didn't feel I was really wanting to tackle just so I can work in that realm of television. So it wasn't that I didn't, want to be involved as much, I did, but just not in that context. So I felt that this switch was necessary not only because I could serve people better, but because I just like being happy where I'm working.
Got it. I understand. I understand. What is a common myth about working in the education space, or specifically in your field of expertise with special education? What is a common myth that you would just like, y'all can't be serious? Like, really? Like, for real? That's what y'all really think we do? Or that's who y'all really think I am as a special education teacher?
Well, I think being an online teacher, especially for as long as I have, this is my 11th year teaching online. So this is pre-pandemic. A lot of people don't believe that we could serve special education students adequately because of either misconceptions they've had about special education as a whole or how it's run in a brick and mortar slash traditional school context. We have our meetings over Google Meet. our IEP meetings or individual education plan meetings over Google Meet. We have a school platform that we meet virtually, and we're touching base with students every day. I work with some students all the time, every day. And then there are some students, based on their needs, I meet with maybe once a week, but they have access to me all the time, every day. They can email me, Skype me, whatever. And throughout my tenure online, I have seen students blossom with the education we're able to provide them, specifically the special education services we're able to provide because of the tools that we have. And so when I hear that, when someone asks me what I do and I tell them, like your tone suggested, Logan, they don't believe it. Like, what? How do you do special ed online? And at first, I have to tell you, my first 6 months of teaching at my current school were a blur. I can't remember them. I remember one specific class connect because it was the very first class connect, which is a virtual class. I remember the very first one. Other than that, things were just flying by me, and I was struggling. I was treading water basically. But once I got the hang of it, things were able to stick, and I felt more comfortable. So I think that's it. That we can serve adequately in an online setting.
I think that that's different. We haven't, Dante, we haven't had anybody that teaches school online.
I don't think so.
Chris,
That's why.
you the first.
Yeah.
Yay, pioneer.
You are the first. I don't think we've had anybody state, not that I can recall. Yeah, we haven't had anybody that says that they teach online. So you're the first. And so I think that that's awesome. And so I
Thanks.
definitely want to ask, how are you able to build those relationships with those students, especially not being able to have um, that physical connection with them, right? The physical touch and different things like that. And how are you able to build relationships with your scholars?
Well, it's not so different from a brick and mortar setting, Logan. It's just about getting to know the students, getting to know them as kids rather than students or, points of data. And we spent a long time working on establishing those relationships. When I start my class connects, I always ask my students, what is something that you are thankful for? And I do that for two reasons. First of all, I'm a big gratitude guy, as you'll probably find out in our conversation. But secondly, it gives me a little window into their lives. And I love learning things about my students. Like, for example, I have one student who is a hockey player, and he attends hockey practice sometimes at 10 at night. That's when the hockey practice starts. And so he's at the rink until 11 or 11:30 even, getting home. And when you've played a sport late at night, your body needs to decompress, needs to cool down. And so sometimes he doesn't get to bed until 1 in the morning. And then we're scheduled to meet at 8:30. And this is a teenager. So sometimes waking up is a bit of a struggle. But because we're able to have that conversation and I'm able to understand where he's coming from as a person, not just a student who should be in my class at 8:30 sharp, I'm able to say, you know what? Tell you what, you come in when you wake up and we'll roll with it. And if we need to make up some time later on, we will. But I know that's important to you, and you do a great job of getting all your work done and on time. So that allows me to be more flexible with you because you've put in the work. And so getting to know the students is crucial, because if I don't know them, if they don't see me seeing them as a person, not just someone I have to give orders to, it's going to be a struggle to try to get them to do anything, especially when sometimes students are by themselves in their homes. Some parents unfortunately can't stay at home all day to watch their kids. They have to go to work, and these kids are by themselves at home, expected to independently follow their class schedules and get their work done on time. Some kids can do it. Some kids struggle with that. So the more I'm able to establish that connection, the easier it is for us to make progress.
I love that. I love that. Dante, come on, jump in, man.
Uh, all right, Chris. So, with it being online, can you talk about the struggles for people? For let's say we have a teacher who wants to start doing online teaching online. Can you talk about any struggles you might have as far as just teaching online as a whole? Because I
I
know
think
I used to take like college courses
Mhm.
online, but you're an adult then. You're going into an adult. So can you just talk about that as far as teenager or for somebody who's doing homeschool or something online?
Well, I think the number one skill, actually, there are two skills that are equally important that you absolutely have to have, Dante. You have to have organization skills, and you have to have some semblance of self-sufficiency. You have to be organized in what your plan is for the day. You have to have all your plans in place. You have to know where all your files are, all your physical tools, because you are an island, so to speak. Yeah, because I mean, yes, I am part of a school. I'm a part of a staff, but the next closest staff member to me physically is about an hour away. No, I just got a new one that's about a mile and a half away. She's just joined our staff. But I mean, my closest special ed colleague is about an hour away. And so I need to be able to handle things myself for the most part, make sure I can get online and I can work the computer. That ties into that self-sufficiency, because if I need someone watching over my shoulder all the time, if I need someone needing to make sure I'm meeting with students, I'm getting my paperwork done, I am filing my attendance on a daily basis, I'm not going to be at the school very long. In fact, we've had teachers quit on the second day because they were not ready for the rigor that this school demands of you. It's not just I sit here prattling on all day, what in my pajamas, getting a paycheck. You have to be your own boss to a certain extent. You have to make sure you are logged in on time and that you have all your plans ready to go without someone making sure you're walking into this office and you are ready to hit that play button.
Okay. Okay. So for our audience out there, if you want to do if anybody wants to teach online, Chris is letting you know you need to be self efficient and organized. And a big thing I got from that was basically kind of being like an entrepreneur, sort of in the sense of
Yes. Yes.
your like your own business. Pretty much, you got your own nucleus or your own way of doing things. So you just got to be organized. That way it coexists with your students, correct?
Yes, Dante. I love that how you connected that with entrepreneurialism,
Yeah.
because it is in a very much tied to I have to be on my own and I have to make this work. And yes, I can message my colleagues and say, "Hey, I have a question about this, and how do you do this? Can you help me with this?" But a lot of that comes from the fact that I have everything else done. I have my computer up and running. You can hear me clearly. You can see me clearly. I know what my schedule is. And for special education, we have to follow a timeline for every plan, every IEP, every individualized education plan is yearly. So every year we have to meet with the student and his or her parents, so we can make sure that we're following, we're making progress on their goals, so on and so forth. And I have to make sure that I send out the team meeting notice for those meetings on time. I have to make sure I have the agenda ready to go. I have to make sure I have the team assembled. That falls on me. And if I don't do it, no one else will. And not only do I get in trouble, the school gets in trouble because there are federal mandates that come along with special education plans.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let me see here. Lo, you want to go ahead, take a break real quick? Give him a quick second.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Go
So we got
ahead.
to pay some bills real quick, Chris, and then we'll get right back into it. All right.
Sounds good.
So listen, guys, this is the Class in Session podcast. All right. This is the Class in Session podcast. Yes, the Class in Session podcast. And listen, we need you all to do 3 things for us really, really quick. Really quick. We need you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. All right. We need you to do those 3 things for us. We need you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.
Okay.
All right. That's right, Chris. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We need you to do those 3 things for us because listen, it's all about adding value and making an impact in the education space. And that's why we started the podcast. All right. So listen, guys, if you love what we're doing, you love the value that we're adding, please share it with your network, share it with your community. All right. And share it with another teacher because at the end of the day, we just want to add value. So again, this is the Class in Session podcast. Let's get right back into it. Dante.
All right, Chris. I got a question for you here. So let's say you meet the Secretary of State, just or we'll do even bigger. Let's say you meet somebody in the government. Let's say you meet the president and Secretary of Education. And they say, "Hey, Chris, you could change one thing for education. And it has to be uniform throughout the country." What are you doing?
I would make sure that education is student centered and not standards centered. There is so much misconception that students are a student's value is based on their standardized test scores. In Minnesota, we call them the MCAs, the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. They are a high stakes test that we take every year. And what they do is they create undue pressure and stress on teachers, students, and families. And all they do is they just take a snapshot of what a student does on 1 or 2 days a year. Instead, I want to have a system that tracks how a student does through every, month or every week, and it focuses on their skills, not just the skills that some legislator who may not have experience in education past their college career has, because you have to understand that just because a student is not good in, say, math, it doesn't mean that they are not smart. And we have to look at the student as a whole person, not just how they read, write, and do arithmetic. And those tests, those standardized tests, they undervalue students, they undervalue people. And moreover, you look at something like the skilled trades industry is horribly and criminally overlooked by standardized tests. I know someone I'm very close to who did not do very well in high school. They struggled and it's not they were a troublemaker, but they just didn't click in high school. They entered college, boom, they skyrocketed. and now they're one of the best manufacturing engineers in their industry because of how they blossomed in that environment. But first of all, you have, I mean, they didn't have to go through that struggle in high school because they could have gone through a better system. And so I think making education more student centered than standards centered would serve our country in a much grander way. And yes, it might be expensive to change, but change is hard for anything. But the change is definitely worth it.
Okay, I'm following you. I'm following you. So basically, cutting back on the standardized testing, making things more centered around growth with your students, correct? And
Yes,
basically
yes.
grading over a period of time.
Yes, because I'm not saying we can't have formative assessments. You can't see how a student is doing at a particular point. Otherwise, how do you know what to change? We do formative assessments all the time. If you say, in fact, you look using your GPS does formative assessments. If you're going down the road and you take a wrong turn, what do? They recalculate. Or as our friend Duncan Kirkwood says, they reroute. And so you have to make sure that you have those assessments, but establish them around the student rather than establishing them around the standards.
Get in low.
I like that. 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 I think that honestly, just being, transparent with you, Chris, I really think that they should let go of standardized testing. Because it's a lost cause, right? Like you have kids now that social media runs their life, and in various aspects of social media with TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and all of the other social media platforms that they have that these kids know about. And I just think that it's time, like you said, it's time for a change. Yes, it'll be a little expensive, but I think that it'll be worth it in the end, right? Because now you can teach kids various trades, right? And you don't need to do that with a standardized test. I think that that's important because kids are losing how to interact with one another, right? Like they know how to talk to you through social media, but they don't know how to talk to you if you sit right next to them. Just so soft skills, life skills, different things like that. Like I think that that needs to be taught more in the schools, so that way our babies can learn how to cipher between the two, right? Like, yeah, I've seen it happen. For example, with my oldest boy, you know, he was saying something. He was telling me a story a while back, and he was telling me something, and he was just like, "Man, I should have talked to her when I seen her." And he was talking about some little girl, and so he was like, "I should have talked to her when I seen her." So he gets on social media to talk to her, and I'm like, "Why didn't you just talk to her when you seen her in person? Like, what was wrong with that? Like, what?" Oh, dad. And so we had a conversation, and he was like, "Dad, I just didn't feel confident enough." I said, "So you feel confident digitally?" And so just having that conversation with him, and just I really try to push him to get out of his comfort zone, because I think that that's important and that's how you grow. And so, like, you said, I think removing the standardized testing and catching our kids up to speed with soft skills and life skills and things like that. So I think that that's important.
Yeah, and I really like what you said, Logan, about getting out of your comfort zone. I think that's what legislators need to do, because when they are elected into office, they are elected based on their prior experience in whatever field. If you're going to tell teachers how to teach and you're going to tell students how they are going to learn, then you should know what is working and what doesn't, not based on your own experience, but on what is actually happening. And so, for all the legislators out there listening, I challenge you, if you have not spent any time in a school in the last 10, 15 years, volunteer at a school for a week. Go into a classroom, offer your services, and see how schools are actually run. What do teachers actually have to do? What is working and what doesn't? Because once you step out of your comfort zone and you see what the truth really is instead of what you remember it being, that might change how you introduce or back legislation that affects our future.
I agree. You talking that talk now, Chris. Now you talking that talk. I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it. Now you talking that talk. Let's detour for a quick second before we get back into the other questions. Um, so Dante said, of course, you being a speaker and different things like that. So can you touch on what that looks like? Why did you become a speaker? And just let's just talk about it. Let's just have a conversation, and let's talk about your speaking career and things like that. How long have you been doing it? Why do you do it? Different things of that nature. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. So my speaking journey starts in March 2015 when I contracted a flesh-eating bacteria known as necrotizing fasciitis. I had done the horrible deed of scratching my hand on my garage wall. And 3 days later, I woke up with a bump on my right elbow. I went to the urgent care clinic. The doctor said it might have been bursitis, which is an inflammation of the bursa sac in our joints, and to keep an eye on it, which I did. And I kept an eye on it throughout the day as that bump grew and grew and grew until my right arm was 3 times the size of my left. I like to say that I was the Incredible Hulk in mid-transformation. But instead of being
I can see that. I like
instead of
that.
being angry and smashy, I was more sicky and tiredy. Becky found a babysitter for the kids, took me to the hospital here in town. Over a course of 12 hours, they found out that I not only had a ginormous right arm, I had gotten septic, which means I possibly had poison coursing through my veins, trying to kill the infection. And later the next morning, they discovered they could not help me. This was beyond them, they actually said. And so they flew me 100 miles east to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. That's where they diagnosed me with necrotizing fasciitis. After they knew what they were dealing with, they quickly put me into my first surgery, which included me being in a coma. They put me in a coma for a week. They had to remove all the infected skin and tissue from my right arm, shoulder, chest, and back. And when they removed all that skin, they discovered that the infection had gone so far into my right arm that they were certain they would have to amputate. However, they found that I still had hand function. So they took a flap of skin from my left thigh and placed it in my right hand and forearm. So since this is my thigh on my hand, I call this my thand. Copyright pending. And I'm not sure you can really tell the difference between this skin and my skin grafts here, and even my original skin here.
Right.
But then that left a huge hole in my left leg, which they couldn't close normally. So they had to remove one of my quadricep muscles from my leg, and then installed knobs on either side to tighten the wound over time. So most of those major surgeries took place in that 5-day coma. I woke up and I was filled in by my wife, my father-in-law, who graciously opened their house to my wife and kids and our dog for 2 weeks, as it turned out, while I was in the hospital. My in-laws lived in Rochester, the same town, so it was very convenient. And then my brother even flew in from Michigan to be with us for a week and a half. So they filled me in on what was going on while I was out, and then they left. And so I was in the hospital room with a huge cast in my right arm and shoulder. I had bandages, and my leg was all strapped in a splint. Physically, I was starting to slowly heal, but it was my mind that was the struggle, because I was wondering, what was I going to do? How was I going to live my life? What was I be able to do physically? How was I going to handle things mentally? How we were going to deal with this financially? I had lots of questions, guys, but no answers. Thankfully, Becky helped me turn my ship around. With a conversation, she told me how people were stepping up to help us, ranging from keeping our driveway and walkways snow free to someone starting a GoFundMe account to help offset the lost wages I had incurred. It turned out that I had lost an entire quarter of the school year being in the hospital. And that GoFundMe account really helped with, with bills that I couldn't pay because I ran out of sick days. When Becky told me all of this, all that, what I call personal bacteria, all those questions that were festering in my mind, causing me to have a negative and almost depressed mindset, washed away. And I was left with what I now call the attitude of gratitude, or TAG for short. And so I started practicing TAG, starting looking at things in a more grateful mindset. And I felt my gratitude improving, obviously, but also my positivity and my resilience. So I started setting goals for myself. I joined Taekwondo with my son. And as of earlier this year, I earned my first degree black belt in Taekwondo. I started running again. And now I'm preparing to qualify for the Boston Marathon. I started writing about my experiences, and I'm now a co-author, and I've published some magazine articles. And I'm now a professional speaker, which I started finally in January 2020. I decided I can't keep this to myself. I have to share this with others, because there are others out there suffering like I was. And if I can help them increase their gratitude, positivity, and resilience, then my life was not just for me to regain. It serves a purpose. So I started speaking in January 2020. I set up an event at my church, which is across the street from my house. It went well. I'm thinking, hey, this is great. People like my message. I feel good as a speaker. Let's do this thing. And then the pandemic hit. So nothing was opening up for me, obviously, because everything was closed. So I started my own podcast. I needed to get the reps in. I needed to practice my skills. So when things eventually opened up again, I would be ready. So I started the Scar Bearers podcast. At first, I started sharing my message, but then I realized, wow, I can only have so many episodes talking about me. So I invited others on, and right now I'm on episode 132 coming up. But as you have guessed, things have opened up, and as you and I have talked, Logan, we've been speaking in person, and things are going very well now. I'm applying for TEDx talks. I'm working on a book, working on a course, and I actually had a very good year speaking so far in terms of speaking in person and online.
I love that. Oh man, I love that. First, I want to say thank you. Let me say that first. I just want to say thank you for who you are. Thank you for continuing to fight. Thank you for continuing to progress forward. Thank you for continuing to answer the calling. I know it's not easy. And just, hearing your story and what you've had to overcome to get you to this point, of, like you said, you practice tag, which is the attitude for gratitude. And so just being able to be in that space of gratefulness um, put you on a whole nother level. And so, I tip my hat to you, and I commend you for that, because I don't know how many people could have made it through that.
Well, thank you. I greatly appreciate that, Logan.
Right? I don't know how many people could have made it through that. Like, you was in a coma for a whole week. Right? You was in a coma for a whole week. You have your thigh skin on your hand because they couldn't put anything else on there because you didn't have any extra skin. And so just to hear stuff like that, and you had a flesh eating bacteria on the inside of you that the urgent care doctor said, "Hey, listen, this is out of our reach. There ain't nothing we can do. Hey, pop some Tylenol and just keep a lookout for it." Right. And I just thought that was just like, wow, like, yo, like you're here for a reason. And so I think that that's amazing. And so I commend you for that and tip my hat to that. And you know what I'm saying? I give you hand claps, standing ovation, all of that. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Dante, come on, man. Let's finish up.
All right. We got one more question for you. If there was a number as far as educators, as far as salary pay, what do you think teachers should make? And this can be on a global scale. We know cost of living it varies based on the state. But at the end of the day, teachers are underpaid, educators are underpaid as a whole. But what do you think educators should make if it was you? If you was a lawmaker and they could say, "Hey, Chris, you can roll out your new payment plan," what would it be?
Well, I don't feel comfortable just giving a flat number like $100,000. But I will say, as you said, Dante, based on the area, based on what the standard of living is, I would look at that and say, okay, based on where this person's living, I need this person to be the best teacher they can be, which means I need this person to focus on teaching when they are on the clock. So I want to give this person enough money so they don't have to worry about, getting a second job to make ends meet. They don't have to worry about how much daycare is going to be. Because once you have educators fully focused on educating, that's when the wheels of progress are turning at their full tilt. Because educators have to deal with so many other things besides just teaching, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They are social workers. They are counselors. They are referees sometimes. They're therapists. All of that is wrapped into the role of a teacher. They're already doing so much. And so much is expected of them, again, from people who don't fully understand what goes into teaching. So if you can help that person out, that educator out, by saying, you know what, you do all this, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure you are taken care of financially so you can take care of our future. That's what I would say.
So there's no set number then.
It's hard to say because, if you look at places that have a high cost of living, $100,000 might cut it and might not.
Right.
And, I'm not saying that we teachers should be millionaires.
Right.
Okay. Because I understand that we're paid by tax dollars and there are so many other things that have to go into where tax dollars go. But at the very least, if you can keep my mind on teaching, so I don't have to get a second job or I don't have to decide, okay, am I going to pay the rent or am I going to eat?
Mm-hmm.
Or are my kids going to eat?
Right.
That's all that we need to do to make, not all we need to do, but that would be one way to make sure that teachers can teach to their greatest extent.
I agree. I agree. We on the same page with that, except for my number. I think you should start teachers off anywhere, starting off base pay anywhere between 80 to 100,000. Because the work that you all do, the work that you put in, like I feel like that kind of gives teachers. I kind of feel like that puts a, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, that kind of puts a positive light on teachers, because teachers work 50, 60 hours a week, but they only
Yeah.
get paid for 37 and a half, maybe 40, depending on what state or city they're in.
Yeah.
And so I think starting there, so that way, like you said, they don't have to get a second job, right? They don't have to worry about those different things, and just being, providing them with enough to where they can actually pay their bills, and they not having to struggle to pay their bills and different things like that. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. And of course, Dante, if people that have listened to the podcast, y'all know he talks about systems, and so we're gonna allow him to touch on that. But I'm with you 100%. Like, I think it needs to be anywhere between 80 to 100 starting out, and then go up from there.
Yeah.
Dante.
Yeah, I just think I'm more of an automated systems person as far as just getting things in a line. Like, you need services. So if you can provide a service for teachers, I think that number needs to go up just a little bit as far as teachers. So if we use Tennessee, for example, they like 35,000. I think the number needs to be somewhere around 50.
Yeah.
But it has to be, but the plans has to be in place, like housing programs, automobile
Mm-hmm.
programs, grocery programs, stipends, food, you know what I'm saying? Insurance, all that has to be top tier. It can't be just borderline, like, I feel like if you have a top tier insurance policy, I think you know what I'm saying? I think that is big. And I think housing, if you had a top tier housing program, kind of like how they have a first home buying program, but I think if you had
Mm-hmm.
one for educators and tiers of it, whether you be a first time educator, if you have a kid, single home, just something in place, that way if it doesn't work out, you at least have some kind of asset you can sell, or just to get on your feet or whatever you want to relocate. So I
Yep.
just be big on system in place to balance out, what I'm saying, that salary. But I still think whatever they get in every city and state, it needs to increase at least by 20, 30 grand. So if you in Miami, you making 80, and we all know Miami cost of living is very high, you should
Mm-hmm.
probably be around that 100K,
Yeah.
or something like that. And of course, it'll trickle up to whatever, because you got to think superintendents. I think superintendent in where we're from in Tennessee is at like 200K, but
Wow.
that doesn't even include the responsibility of everything that they do. Like, you're
Yeah.
talking about
I
somebody
agree,
who's
Dante.
literally
Yeah.
over there. Yeah, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, their responsibility is almost like the president of education in that city, if you want to be technically honest, because you're going over budgets. You're dealing with teacher pay. You're dealing with the infrastructure, the transportation. You got so many tiers of everything that's going on that you're managing for a whole county. So I just think the responsibility that you have, that we have for young adults, must tie in to the salary of what they have. Because if I have all
Yeah.
these hats, then that number should be hitting some of the hats in some way, shape, or form. And let's be honest, teachers you going to school just like a lawyer, in a sense. A lawyer, a doctor, they make you have all these certifications and everything, and their pay is rewarded. I mean, a teacher had to teach a lawyer how to be a lawyer, if you want to be
Mm-hmm.
technical about it. So
Yeah, exactly. If you want to have the best education possible, you have to have a strong foundation.
yeah. So
Absolutely. 10 out of 10 recommend. Absolutely. All right, last question, and then we'll close it up and get up out of here. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone starting out in your career? And before you answer that, what is one piece of advice you would give them starting out in your career? And what was your biggest struggle when you first started out?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give someone starting out and what was the biggest struggle, I think they are tied into each other. That is, make sure you have a solid system of support, because if when you go into your first year of teaching, you depending on what your education was, whatever field experience you had in college, what have you, having a solid system of support to help you throughout all those different parts of teaching, is crucial to make sure that you make it from year one to year two. Because if you don't, if you're facing something you've never dealt with before, trying to handle it while you're handling all these other different responsibilities, it's going to, that struggle is going to bleed into those different responsibilities and everything else will weaken. So make sure that you have systems in place or people in place that you can go to, that if you have that a certain struggle, you can go to that person and put out that fire and get earn those skills that you need to handle that situation better next time on your own or with less help. So I would say just, you are not an island. You are not alone. Make sure you use those resources. And if you don't have those resources, look for those resources. Reach out, ask. People who ask for help are not weak. They are strong because they want to make themselves better and they want to make their students better.
I love that. I love that. Ask for help. Okay. I love that. All right. I like that. I see where you're going with it, Chris. I like that. All right, cool. Awesome. How can people get in contact with you? Do you mind sharing your contact information?
Oh, certainly. Thanks for asking, Logan. I try to keep things simple. So every way you can reach out to me is using Chris DT Gordon. My email address is chris@chrisdtgordon.com. My website is chrisdtgordon.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at chrisdtgordon.com. And my Instagram handle is at chrisdtgordon.
I love
So
it.
that's the blessing of having two middle names. I'm easy to find on the internet because there are lots of Chris Gordons out there, but
Right.
as far as I know, only one Chris DT Gordon.
I love it. Y'all heard him. He said chrisdtgordon.com. Y'all know how to get in contact with him. Last thing before we get up out of here, Chris, do you mind leaving our supporters and listeners with a piece of motivation?
Not at all. Pass on perfection and go for greatness. As someone who has undergone significant and numerous reconstructive surgeries, I cannot ever have a perfect body. I am a combination of Frankenstein's monster and Deadpool. When I go to the beach, kids run away because they've never seen anything like me. And so to get a perfect body is impossible for me. If you look at any billboard, you see a model on that big screen or a nice shiny car. How long did it take for the photographer to take that perfect picture? And how long will that model be that perfect before she has to take off the makeup or that car gets a dent? Instead of striving for perfection, go for greatness. And whatever you do, be consistent in your practice, be diligent in how you approach every task, and be perseverant through not only good times, but the bad, especially. Because if you are consistent, persistent, and perseverant, consistent, deliberate, or diligent and perseverant. See, like me, you won't be perfect, and you might be perfect once in a while, but you will always be great.
Y'all heard him. Don't strive for perfection. Strive for greatness. All right. Listen, Chris, man, listen. Thank you so much for allowing us to interview you. Thank you for coming on to the show. Listen, guys, this is the Class in Session podcast. All right. I am your host, Logan Taylor, with my partner in crime, my brother, Mr. Dante Hampton. And in closing, like we always say, Y.B.Normal.
When you can be extraordinary.
All right, guys, we'll see y'all next week. We love y'all. Peace.